Hi, and welcome to Leaders in Lending. I'm your host, Jeff Keltner, and I'm joined today by Rob Perrelli, who's the head of product for consumer lending at TCF. Rob, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Jeff, for having me this afternoon.
Always a pleasure. You want to just start off by giving our listeners a little bit of background on, TCF, where the consumer lending business fits inside of TCF, and then what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rob Perrelli, head of product for TCF. I've been in this role for the last couple of years. Previously, I ran corporate strategy on the consumer side, but I've been with TCF almost 12 years, Jeff. Can you imagine that? It's been
It's
a
a long
long
time.
time. But TCF is a Midwest premier regional bank with headquarters in Detroit, Michigan. We're close to 50 billion in assets, and we've recently announced a major merger that will further our presence throughout the Midwest. So really excited about the future.
Yeah. Well, Rob, I know you're supposed to tell us about how everything you say is not to be held against your employer. Do you have something you want to tell us before we get going, just to get that out of the way?
Yeah, definitely, Jeff. These words and all the words that I use this afternoon are my words and my words only.
All right. Duly noted. I'll keep that in mind. You and I were talking before we clicked the record button here and started going, and you kind of had mentioned something about, how you think banks need to shift their focus and how they think about products and consumers. And I just wanted to give you a chance to talk through that there, because I thought it was a really interesting point you were making.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a long-standing principle around how we approach the space and serve our customer needs. And it begins with the customer at the end of the day. Um, all decisions that we make in our group specifically start off with identifying how our customers like to interact with us, what types of customers we have, um, what needs they have, etc., and really focus the conversation on meeting their expectations and helping them along their financial journeys. So when you think about consumer lending, and traditionally in the space itself, in financial services, very product centric, right?
Yeah, very much.
And in my area specifically, we've got the kitchen sink of solutions outside of mortgage and home equity. The consumer lending group manages close to a dozen different products, whether it's auto loans, marine loans, RV loans, unsecured installment loans, lines of credit, etc. So we have all types of different tools in our on our belt
Mm-hmm.
that allow us to satisfy our customers' needs. Um, Often those needs have been very product centric and very distinct, let's say, solutions or go to market strategies that sometimes intersect and sometimes don't.
Mm-hmm.
It creates gaps and inefficiencies. How you offer the product, how you originate the product, service the product, you
Mm-hmm.
name it. And if you kind of just shift perspective a little bit and put yourself in the shoes of the customer, uh, it opens your eyes to all different types of, you know, let's call them nuggets of opportunities that you can capitalize on that at the end of the day benefits your customer, most
Mm-hmm.
importantly, and benefits the organization, right? And technology is a critical component to doing so. We talked about this briefly a couple of minutes ago as we were setting up for the podcast, and it's all about over the let's say history of banking. It's been very transaction, very processor or data entry type
Mm-hmm.
work, right? You walk into a branch and I've got this issue. All right, let me help you out, and to punch a few keys, whether it's on a computer or some other way, and you kind of go about your business. By leveraging technology and understanding what our customers need and what their, let's call them, opportunities are along their financial journey, it opens the door to look at all the services and products that the bank has to offer. and it begins creating opportunities across different business units, right? Most organizations are very focused on structures that are centered around products or asset classes to service those customers, and the winning ingredient is really melding all those together from a customer's lens.
How do you think about doing that? I think it's a great point. And I remember, when I was at Google, one of the things the leadership there would always say is we kind of started the same thing. Start with the consumer. And if you're solving the consumer's needs, if you're providing value, ultimately the rest of the business issues, you'll find a way to work them out because you're creating value when you're really solving the customer's problem, helping them with the thing they need. But how do you think about shifting that mindset? Is it, and where does a bank who's interested and says, hey, this makes sense to me? How do you start? Do you think about technology? Do you think about process? Do you think about what branch employees are doing? Or how do you kind of actually dig into what is someone who agrees with that start doing to try and, organize that customer focus, not only in the way they think, but in the way the bank's actually operating?
Yeah, it's a great question. I led one of our business units previously, our inventory finance business at TCF, through a total, let's call it at the time, it was a digital transformation. And, one of the coolest things when we kicked off that effort was to start with a blank sheet of paper, right? Remove all biases, all preconceived notions of how the business is run today, and really take a moment, step back, right? Put yourself in the customer's shoes and say, I have a need, right? How can somebody or some organization fulfill that need? And what's the best way to fulfill that need? And, simply put, it's a journey map, right? Put yourself in the customer's shoes, start with a blank slate, reimagine how the business can meet those customers' needs. In our case, is digitally centered, and in many cases is, right, as that natural progression, right, as we see in business life cycle at the moment in financial services, and understand, this is the most streamlined, effective way to do it. And you're spot on in the sense, Jeff, that all the other things kind of shake out, right, and
Yeah.
you learn a lot along that journey. No pun intended. But it, it solves itself over time, and really it's not to get to the end state. It's to write the next chapter, right? And as you write that next chapter, it naturally leads to places and solutions that you probably haven't thought of in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So that's really what's cool about transformation. Number one, from a digital perspective, but number two, just staying relentlessly focused on the customer.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that it's not a one and done part of your strategy, and digital transformations are an interesting moment where you can take a little bit more of a blank slate, where that can be harder to do with existing processes in a branch. I'm curious how you think of this too in the context of the branch. Like, how does this shift how you want branch employees operating, what you want their interactions to look like, maybe how the branches are actually designed? Is do you think those things shift as you move towards a mindset of helping a customer along their journey versus being more product oriented in how you approach that customer in the branch as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point, Jeff. We did some pretty cool things over the last couple of years, centered around the branch itself. And it's, we coined the term, consultative conversations, right? Less
Consultative.
transaction
I like that.
oriented, where, we could sit down with our clients, our customers, and better understand, hey, you came into the branch today to fulfill, a very specific need. Let's say it was an issue with a debit card, right? But we've done a lot of work internally to understand our customers better through segmentation, how they transact, how they interact with the bank, and better understand through discussion around, what makes up the story. We all have a story, Jeff, and you have to capture that story and understand. Hey, this client who just walked in, the last time they were here, we sat down, we talked about, their daughter, is in high school and saving up money to buy a car. and it's really exciting time. I'm a little nervous because I've got to teach my daughter how to drive a car, right? I've
Yep.
never done that. It's my firstborn. I'm freaking out, etc. Right? But understanding the story around it, right? And a lot of these stories they have intersection points with your financial journey, right? They're closely tied
Hmm.
in some cases, and knowing the best way to help them along that journey, right? And kind of bringing all the different solutions that the bank has to offer to support them.
Yeah, this is, I think, such a great point. And the one that I, as a newbie, if you will, I mean, I guess I've been at Upstart almost 10 years, so I'm 9 years now. So I'm coming up on a decent amount of time in the financial services industry. But the lack of understanding of the suite of products that's available that most consumers have, and we ask them to kind of tell us what they want, and they really come in more with a need than an understanding of what the right product is. And I think the idea of a consultative conversation that helps them go from where they're at and what their needs might be to the right product or offering that the bank has to solve that need is really important, because the belief that they'll understand that or have the right answer, I think it can be a little bit misguided for at least me as a consumer and a relatively, I think, savvy consumer. That was true. So I imagine it's true for the broader public.
Right.
Now I do
Less
want to get into one
pushing,
thing
more engaging. All right.
more
Less
engaged.
push.
Yeah, what they say, first seek first to understand and then to be understood. You first got to understand what your customer's really asking for, and then you can talk about how you do that. So I do want to ask, you guys launched into an unsecure product in a kind of new way, not that long ago. I remember in partnership with us here at Upstart. But I kind of want to start off with, like, why was that something you wanted to do? Does that fit into this story about understanding your consumers' needs, and why was unsecured lending something you wanted to add to the bank?
Uh, Great point, Jeff. Uh, to raise that topic. So here we were. It was the summer of 2018. I
Mm-hmm.
remember fondly because we just finished a large work set around redefining our organization's values, purpose, right? Overall
Mm-hmm.
holistic strategy, how we want to go to market. And, one of the first major steps in the spring of 18 was a major segmentation analysis and understanding, our customers, who they are, how they interact, and what their needs
Mm-hmm.
are. And more importantly, to the bank's purpose, where are they fulfilling their needs, right? If it's with TCF or with others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I remember fondly. I just that work set completed. I just returned from an epic vacation to Italy with the family. It was my son's first trip. It was fantastic. We were in Rome. Had a chance to be blessed by the Pope. So it was pretty
Oh,
amazing.
wow. That's a
But
great
we
trip.
came back and said a prayer on the way home. Came back. And we learned some really interesting things about our customers. Number one, they had a very, very large need to, you know, well, I'll step back a second. Segmentation analysis told us two major groups at the organization. Let's call them promising families and
Mm-hmm.
the maintainers, right? So we've got these
Mm-hmm.
two large sets of types of customers that are, let's say, generally engaged with the
Mm-hmm.
bank. Um, However, they have needs that were unmet, and they were fulfilling those needs elsewhere. Um, we believed that we can create a greater benefit for those customers if we already fulfilled some of their needs from a
Mm-hmm.
depository, checking, savings perspective. However, it would combine those other needs being met elsewhere. There should be additional benefit to those customers by
Mm-hmm.
offering types of products like the unsecured installment program. So we were really psyched to launch that with Upstart in 2019. Tremendous results throughout the launch itself.
Mm-hmm.
NPS scores 80 plus. I mean, highest
Yeah.
highest that TCF ever achieved, specific to any product at the bank. Our customers loved it. They were going elsewhere previously to fulfill those needs. And we were able to enter the space, provide that solution to those customers,
Mm-hmm.
leveraging our existing relationship with those customers to eliminate origination fees, meet them in the channels that they wanted to be met.
Hmm.
However, had a pretty holistic approach to it, right? So we go back to that branch engagement center this topic, and what was really cool was, the Upstart product that we white labeled um, is offered digitally, right?
Hmm.
And we knew early on that those two customer sets still find extreme high value in coming into a branch to talk to
Yep.
our bankers. So we wanted the ability to naturally fit this solution as part of the conversation when needs were identified. So it's very needs focused that allowed our bankers to leverage tech, right, to
Hmm.
create what we called offered solutions that could then be met in any channel, any way our customers wanted to interact with us. So they could sit down on the spot and apply, check their rates, right, for a personal
Hmm.
loan, number one. Or number two, that they found interest, but they want to learn a little bit more about the product. No problem. We were able to easily create connection points that allowed us to engage with them via email, right? So it was really cool in the sense of all this train of information being shared across all parties was was created, and the infrastructure was created from day one, right? So we
Yep.
had awesome amount of visibility into the product, right? And engagement was bar none. Our bankers loved engaging with our clients around this product as they identified those needs, and it was very natural, right? So
Hmm.
it was less about selling and more about needs fulfillment, which just we knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this point because I think you're, in my experience, a bit unique in how well the branch experience tied to a primarily digital product, and that's, I think, not a guarantee. It's something I hear many bankers worried about. If I have a digitally oriented origination process, like how does my branch employee work with that? Are they comfortable with that? How do I get them ready to talk about maybe a new product that's really, well, my experience is most banks have an unsecured product. They've never really talked about it with consumers, right? It's kind of a upon request. We figure out there's a piece of paper somewhere that they can get this thing approved, but it's not something that's invested in. And you had, bankers both actually talking to a good number of clients about this and happy about the results of using a digitally oriented origination process. I'm curious how you got them both comfortable with the product and how to position it and talk to customers about it, where it fit, and then how you got them comfortable with the kind of non-branch or at least the digital nature of the origination process.
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back to what we talked about earlier. Eliminate, let's call it the non-value added processing,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, and I had the opportunity as we were launching the product throughout the network to visit, right, each of our geographies in the Midwest and spend time with folks and really helping our bankers understand that you want to put all the effort into the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's around having those engaging discussions around and fulfilling, identifying, and fulfilling needs, right? And less time typing, checking
Yeah.
status, moving paper around, that kind of stuff. It's unnecessary, right? The value is in the customer having a need, right? I need X for Y, and being able to do that most effectively and efficiently as possible. And the
Mm-hmm.
bankers understood that, right? It gave them more time to help those customers or help other customers, right?
Yeah.
Rather than doing that processing or data entry type work.
More consultative conversations,
You got
less data entry. And I love the part of this where you took the Rob Perrelli Roadshow out and talked to the bankers, because I think that human connection is so critical to getting those employees on board and understanding and really engaged with the process. So I thought that was a great engagement strategy that you used, and it seems to have really paid dividends for you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's nothing like being able to sit down and share coffee with folks and talk about, what they live and breathe day to day, right?
Yep.
Like we talked about earlier around that digital transformation journey mapping, I also want to spend time instead of being cooped up into an office and making guesses around how our bankers want to interact with our clients. I made it a top priority to spend time with the bankers themselves and understand how they want to interact with their customers.
Yeah, I love that part of the story. So I want to ask one more thing about this this project, which is a little bit of changing gears here. But you guys launched a new product, arguably one of the riskier products in consumer lending, which many banks have been hesitant to have at scale because of the level of risk and the level of comfort, let's say, risk committees, credit committees have with it. And you did it with a fintech partnership, which I think also many banks are nervous about. How do I do due diligence? How do I get on board? So you navigated that, I think, pretty well at TCF in terms of getting everybody on board. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about what you found to be effective and bringing the organization along with the desire to do something that is in at least two different ways, kind of on the edge of the comfort zone of many banks, and how you were able to navigate the kind of multiple stakeholders in the process at the banks. I think it's something I think a lot of the bankers I talk to struggle with, as they maybe see a vision for what their consumer needs, how they could get it done, but then how do I get my organization aligned to actually deliver on that? So it's a different challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I don't want to call it dumb luck, but there's some magic to the process, right? Very
Yep.
early on, um, and it was more from my own personal perspective, a fear of not knowing or a fear of not knowing the unknown. I don't know how the saying goes. I screwed up at the time.
The
Um,
unknown unknowns.
yeah, the unknown unknowns, but something
Yeah.
catching me, a blindside, because you hit it on the mark. Riskier asset class, number one. Number two, fintech partnership, relatively new to banks, right?
Yep.
And number three, a more innovative / creative approach to the modeling, right, and pricing, risk-based pricing. So there's definitely for me, there was value in engaging early and often, right? And I've used this all the time.
Yep.
No, it's not just because I'm from Chicago and the
That's
voting
voting
process,
early and often,
but
right? Yeah.
right.
That's what they
It
say
was
about
more in this.
Chicago.
It
Yeah.
was more in the sense of I want to bring everybody along, right?
Yep.
Having mutual respect for a variety of experts throughout all of our risk perspectives at the bank was extremely valuable to me in the sense of partnering with them, collaborating with them from day one when this concept and this go-to-market strategy was in its infancy. So I placed a lot of emphasis around that due diligence. And those folks had equal say, strong say, and were key stakeholders in deciding how we go to market, right? So they played an integral role. Not to say that there were challenges, no doubt, but with a mutual understanding of, hey, we identified these challenges early in the process. As we look across the landscape, can we solve these challenges? And it was less centered on, hey, we want to launch a product, get it to market by June, right?
Yep.
Which is a totally different approach than typically undertaken. So it afforded us the ability to solve those challenges as we went through the process, and the result was was mutually identified and benefited from by all parties, right? So, the old saying, and I'm going to screw this one up too, Jeff. I always screw these up. We can all be fathers of this child of this product, right?
Yep.
And we know that at the end of the day, the mother is the bank, right? But we can all take ownership, right, of this solution. And the result at the end of the day was a lot better than any of us anticipated from the beginning.
That's great. I think the early engagement with all the stakeholders is critical. It's a great piece of advice on how you do this. And I think the other part that was true about the way you described the story to me is the the focus on the consumer being the enemy. I mean, you brought people along with why this was important and not just, hey, there's this project I got to get done. Can you sign off on the thing so we can get it out the door? It's more like, hey, we want to do this to solve our customers' problems, our challenges. There's an opportunity here. This is why it matters. Help me find the path to making this thing work. And I think that's, it was a great style of engagement.
Well, and it did help that, a personal loan has a variety of different use cases and can touch all of us personally. So some of the magic was, interacting with some of these folks one-on-one and saying, hey, see how this could have helped you, right? So I always did a little background on everybody, right? So did some of my own personal due diligence.
That's good selling strategy. You got to have you got to find the right way to approach each stakeholder. I love it. Well, Rob, thanks for your time today. I always end this podcast with the same 3 questions in kind of a lightning round format. So I'm going to subject you to the lightning round now and get your answers. But the first one is, what's the best piece of career advice you've ever gotten?
This one's great. I love this question, Jeff. Very early in my career, I was told, I was working on a key project, and it was my first big project for the organization. And I'm freaking out. A senior leader at the organization came to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, hey, listen, you can't mess this up bad enough that we can't fix it. So just relax, right? It gave me the confidence to know that, hey, it's okay to fail, right? Fail often, fails in short, junkets, so to speak, and move on, right? Keep fixing and reiterating and move on. Right, don't let it tear you apart.
I like that. I assume he was a little more colorful than you were on the podcast.
Definitely.
That's okay. Colorful bankers. I love it. Second, what's the best piece of advice you've gotten around consumer lending specifically in your career in consumer lending?
In consumer lending, I'm relatively young in consumer lending, only being a couple of years in this area. But the best piece of advice is, especially within our organization, is find allies, right? Partners across, up and down, you name it. It's super critical because so many different parts of the organization have to come together to make consumer lending work, right? So partner, right? Internally, externally, any which way you can.
I like it. It's like that. Oh, we're going to use one more saying, so we see that a lot of sayings. Let's say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right? You gotta. If you want to make a difference, really in the long term, you got to have lots of people on board.
Totally spot on.
I think that's an old African proverb. Is how I've seen it positioned. All right, and my last one. Can you give me a bold prediction for the future? I'm going to bring you back in a year. You're gonna have to stand up next to this one. But like, what's your bold prediction for the future in banking, lending, or in general?
I'm hoping that we see the light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll have a repeat of the Roaring '20s, Jeff.
Roaring '20s prediction. I like that one.
Wouldn't that be fun? And imagine all the different needs that we could satisfy from a financial services perspective.
Gonna have to read my F. Scott Fitzgerald to figure out what the next 20 years hold. The Roaring '20s coming back, but I like it. All right, Rob Perrelli from TCF. Thanks for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Jeff, you're the best. Had a blast.
We'll do it again soon, Rob.
Definitely.